Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. My name is Jessica Routson, and I am a program manager here at the National Association of Regional Councils, or NARC. We are joined today by Trent Frazier, the Deputy Assistant Director for CISA's Stakeholder Engagement Division. As Deputy Assistant Director, Mr. Frazier leads CISA's strategy to build, promote, and sustain strategic partnerships across industry, public sectors, and the international community. He also oversees partner coordination and information sharing to support the security and resiliency of critical infrastructure against hazards to include terrorism, natural disasters, and cyber attacks. Prior to joining CISA, Mr. Frazier served as the Executive Director for the Office of Campaigns and Academic Engagement at the Department of Homeland Security, where he led the planning and implementation of 3 national education and public awareness campaigns focused on combating human trafficking, promoting suspicious activity reporting, and fostering resiliency across colleges and universities. Mr. Frazier has a Juris Doctorate from Washington University School of Law and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Missouri at Columbia. Today, we are going to hear about some of the important work CISA is doing with economic development districts and additional resources available to all EDDs. One more thing that I'll say before I hand things over to Mr. Frazier is that this webinar is being offered to you by the NATO Research Foundation's Economic Development District Community of Practice. It's funded by the U.S. Economic Development Administration, and NARC is a funded partner for this project. And we are super excited to be working with the NATO Research Foundation, hosting events and information sharing sessions with EDDs across the country like this webinar today. Through the EDD Co-op, the NATO Research Foundation and its partners will provide tools, resources, and networking opportunities for EDD staff to strengthen organizational capacity and better guide regions towards becoming more competitive, resilient, and equitable. You can find additional information and events on the EDD Co-op website, which I will link in the chat in just a moment. And without further ado, I'll hand things over to Trent. But please, if you have questions throughout the webinar and presentation, type them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen.
All right. Thanks, Jessica. I appreciate that. Thank you to you and to Neil, and certainly thank you to Chairwoman Rath and Executive Director Wallach for inviting me to participate today in this discussion. This is really a follow-up from a discussion I was lucky enough to participate in at your February winter meeting for the National Association of Regional Councils, and I'm particularly excited and pleased to get the chance to be here with you again today. So as mentioned earlier, my name is Trent Frazier. I'm the Deputy Assistant Director for Engagement with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, as we're often known. After participation in the February meeting, I'm very glad to be continuing our work together and want to discuss some of the CISA tools and resources available to local communities and economic development districts across the country, and how CISA has engaged with EDDs in our regions and provide some updates on the work we're doing now with our recently implemented state and local cybersecurity grant. And of course, I very much welcome your questions and look forward to our exchange today, and hope that we have an opportunity to sort of actively engage. So our mission really within CISA is to protect the nation's critical infrastructure from both physical and cyber threats. We kind of call it an all hazards mission. What does that mean exactly? Well, it's our responsibility to protect the systems and assets, whether physical or virtual, that are vital to the United States, where incapacity or destruction of said systems or assets could actually cause a debilitating impact to our national security, to our national economic security, certainly to our public health or safety, or any combination thereof. Those critical systems and assets include those that give us the water we drink, that generate the electricity we need to power our homes, that provide us with gas and the fuel that we need to move products, services, and ourselves throughout the country, and of course all of the other capabilities, products, and resources we rely upon every day in our daily lives. CISA works every day to strengthen the security of our nation's critical systems and functions, and we hope this is a philosophy that you will amplify in the work you're doing, especially given the challenges you face at the local level with constrained resources. This is where CISA hopes to be a resource to our state and local partners. We all want the best defenses, but of course, money, resources, and capability can be a challenge, especially for state and local governments constrained by a smaller or limited operating budget and fewer IT staff than similarly sized private sector entities. So we want to talk a little bit about today some of the work we're doing within CISA, and then transition into some of the resources that we have to offer to our partners. Let me start for a second just by talking at a high level about work we're doing to bolster really the supply chain of critical software and hardware that you're going to rely upon in the implementation and growth of economic districts across the country. So we need state and local government to really be a voice in this effort. This is going to be a team effort for us. But one of the things that we're recently implemented that you will begin to see in media outlets across the country is really driving a discussion about security by design and security by default. What that really means is transferring the burden of security from those who currently have it to those who are most best positioned to really provide that security. The technology that we rely upon every day, whether it's in the provision of necessary government services or in the products and services that we buy and consume, really should be built with security in mind. Technology creators and software developers too often incentivize speed to market and capability expansion over security, and place the burden of security on the millions of end users that rely on devices and capabilities across the country. No one would think of purchasing a car today that did not have seat belts or airbags included as a standard feature, nor would anyone accept paying extra to have these basic security elements installed. But unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the technology that underpins our very way of life. The impacts of unsafe technology are often difficult to measure, but are extremely dangerous for your state's communities and constituents. It's a school district shut down by ransomware, a prolonged theft of intellectual property, a loss of sensitive personal information, or a failure in key components of our electrical grid. From a cybersecurity resilience standpoint, we cannot wait for a catastrophic event to occur before we act. We deserve to expect a basic level of safety and security with all our technology from those who provide them. Now, to achieve this, CISA is asking that every technology provider create products that are both secure by default and secure by design. Well, what does that even mean? Well, security by default means that we expect technology products to have strong security features like seatbelts and airbags right out of the box without added cost and without added configuration from the end user. Attributes of strong security by default will evolve over time, but in today's risk environment, sellers of software must include in their basic pricing the types of features that secure a user's identity, prevent the gathering of evidence, or promote the gathering of evidence for potential intrusions, and control access to sensitive information, rather than as an added or later expensive additional option for the end user to absorb. Equally important is technology that is secure by design. Technology must be purposefully built, tested, and deployed to significantly reduce the number of exploitable flaws before they are introduced into the market for broader use. Achieving this outcome will require significant shifts in how technology is produced, including the code used to develop software. So why is any of this really relevant to you, especially those of you who are working in economic development districts? Well, of course, as we see the continued growth of everything from the Internet of Things and IoT created and linked devices to a broadening of 5G deployed networks and the ever increasing expansion of cloud services and hardware and software devices across our communities, we have to expect more from those who provide those products. It should not be the case that end users are forced configure devices to promote security. They should have security as a matter of course right off the shelf. And for any of you who are working right now to implement smart cities initiatives or smart communities initiatives, we want to ensure that the technologies you're deploying within your communities are designed and delivered with security in mind. They should be delivered to you ready to protect at the moment of use. So we very much encourage you to add your voice to ours as we're working to foster change within the supply chain for security. Now, This obviously is going to take some time. So in the meantime, we will continue to support our state and local government partners in a number of ways through voluntary programs, services, and products, including cybersecurity risk management and resilience services and tools, technical assistance upon request, and by expanding the amount of information we're able to share to improve situational awareness of the threats, vulnerabilities, incidents, and especially the mitigations and recovery actions that we believe should be executed as we begin to identify threats. We want you to have real-time access to information about what we're seeing on broad national networks and what you need to be doing to protect yourselves. Our technical services range from proactive vulnerability scanning to malware analysis. For example, our cyber hygiene service for internet-facing systems is an automated remote scan that provides a report identifying vulnerabilities and mitigation recommendations to improve the cybersecurity of systems connected directly to the internet. We also provide prioritized risk and vulnerability assessments for our critical infrastructure partners. Those are the owners and operators of those systems and assets that are vital to continuing to provide essential services to all of our communities. And as economic development districts, we encourage you to work closely with those owners and operators that are encompassed within your EDDs to ensure that they're capitalizing on the use of those assessments to protect themselves and to address any needed capability gaps or vulnerabilities. In addition to providing a menu of cybersecurity services to our partners, CISA also prevents and disrupts criminal use of cyberspace by building stronger relationships with stakeholders across the cyber ecosystem to improve intelligence sharing. Now, the FBI recently released a report on ransomware attacks from 2022 and across government facilities that had the third highest number of attacks. So we're building capacity through a number of free cyber hygiene services available now to your governments and to your partners and owners and operators within your communities, as well as the implementation of regulations that will be fomented under the recently enacted Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act of 2022, otherwise known as CISA if you don't want to say the whole title, which requires CISA to develop and implement regulations requiring covered entities to report covered cybersecurity incidents and ransomware payments directly to CISA. With that information, we're able to provide more active domain awareness to all of our community partners to ensure that you understand where threats are coming from and what steps you need to take to protect yourselves and your communities. Now, many incidents are perpetrated by ransomware threat actors using known vulnerabilities. By urgently fixing these vulnerabilities and implementing other security controls, as described on a recently released website, stopransomware.gov, organizations can significantly reduce their likelihood of experiencing a ransomware event. Now, unfortunately, most organizations may be unaware that a vulnerability used by ransomware threat actors is present on their network. CIRCIA will also require that CISA develop what we call our ransomware vulnerability warning pilot, which started earlier this year in its initial stages. As part of that ransomware vulnerability warning pilot, CISA will leverage existing authorities and technology to proactively identify information systems that contain security vulnerabilities commonly associated with ransomware attacks and warn our critical infrastructure partners that their systems have been exposed to those vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future events. With that warning, we're then able to ensure that those owners and operators of critical networks and systems take the steps necessary to defend those networks and to mitigate those risks through appropriate mitigation measures. Now, once CISA identifies these affected systems, our regional cybersecurity personnel notify system owners directly of their security vulnerabilities, thus enabling timely mitigation before damaging intrusions occur. And let's talk about that for a moment. Many folks don't realize, but CISA actually has a very sizable regional presence spread throughout the country. I'd like to share with you a little bit more about those regional resources and services that we can offer. Now, within CISA, across the country, we have 10 regions. Those regions encompass a number of products and services that we can offer directly to communities and to entities like yourselves through our protective security program, our cybersecurity advisory services, our emergency communications coordinators, and our chemical security inspection teams. Our regional staff are located across the country and support all 56 states and territories by providing unique services to the critical infrastructure community and by positioning owners and operators to enhance security capabilities through a wide range of initiatives. Through our regions, CISA is directly supporting local government and critical infrastructure owners and operators with tangible risk mitigation solutions, delivering cyber and physical vulnerability assessments, architectural reviews, and design subject matter expertise. Of course, coordinating on incident response, supporting exercise planning throughout communities on a number of threats and hazards, providing national special security event planning and support to large-scale events within a community, and of course, continuous chemical facility inspections and site surveys to implement the chemical facility anti-terrorism standards. We also provide a number of regional engagements directly with economic development districts. And I'm just going to name a few for discussion purposes today. In our Region 4, we had a team recently brief on CISA products and resources to the Kentucky Council of Area Development Districts annual conference in Frankfort, Kentucky. Those personnel have established ongoing relationships with a number of economic development districts throughout the state as a result of that engagement. In our Region 5, CISA regional staff conducted a number of outreach to EDDs in Indiana through the state's Executive Council for Cybersecurity. And within the council, there is now a dedicated economic development committee that supports the development of the state's cybersecurity strategy. CISA has 3 personnel that work directly with this council to provide regular updates on CISA's initiatives, products, and services, as well as share ongoing threat information as we're aware of it. They also actively solicit feedback, and this is critical. It gives us an opportunity to directly receive feedback from economic development districts on ways that we can better support you. In our Region 8, CISA regional staff conducted a pilot community resilience assessment with the Laramie Main Street Alliance, or LMSA, in Laramie, Wyoming, where I have a friend who also teaches at the University of Wyoming, side note, with the end goal of providing the emergency manager with details on how a major incident could impact social functions like the LMSA for the entire community. They interviewed LMSA leadership to better understand their functions, who they support, and what they should rely on to provide that support, and provided those recommendations back directly to help them bolster their resiliency within the community. Those are just a few examples, but we offer those services regularly and free of charge and invite you to engage directly with our regional teams as you're exploring ways that we can better support you in your respective efforts across your communities. Through our role in providing voluntary services to critical infrastructure partners, we directly support our state and local partners in protecting and building resilience into their community's infrastructure, but the partnerships work both ways. Through the services we provide, we've also been able to gain a lot better understanding of where risks live, both within cyber and the physical environment, which has helped inform the development of improved products, services, and guidance for all of our partners to benefit from. And we need that continuous engagement with folks like you who will help us to continue and to improve the products and resources that we have to offer. So let's transition to a much more specific topic, which I think is probably of interest to a number of you, and that is the recently implemented state and local cybersecurity grant program. Now, as you may know, in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act legislation, we actually received a $1 billion grant allocation that would be executed over a 4-year period. This program, designed as a partnership between CISA and FEMA, provides dedicated grant resources in a first-of-its-kind effort to support grant cybersecurity efforts across states, territories, and federally recognized tribes throughout the country. CISA and FEMA are jointly managing this program, where we serve as the subject matter expert and program management office for the implementation of the program, and FEMA provides grant administration service. Now, per the legislation, there are 3 recognized eligible recipients or entities under the program that include states, territories, and federally recognized tribes. However, those entities are then mandated provide job awards or value-in-kind services to communities throughout their jurisdictions. And additionally, there's a 3% set aside specifically within that $1 billion every year that is expressly set aside for federally recognized tribes that would be awarded under a separate notice of funding opportunity for states and territories. Now, as I mentioned, 80% of the funding must pass through to local units of government, with 25% of that funding going to directly support rural communities and rural units of government. However, the legislation also provides additional incentives for multi-entity projects and allows a local government to accept cyber services from states with their consent. That's what we call a value-in-kind transaction to support the to meet that 80% requirement. Now, the designation of an entity by the Economic Development Administration as an economic development district would not necessarily make that an entity eligible as a local government subrecipient under the cybersecurity grant program. However, the entity may in fact be designated as a local government if it meets the definition of a local government as a special district, council of government, local government instrumentality, or other public entity as defined by state law. And those standards and regulatory requirements are, of course, a component of the Notice of Funding opportunity, but we're also available to help assist if you have any questions or would like further guidance on the implementation of that. The current status of the program, we have received 13 submissions from states and territories to date. That is out of the original 54 states and territories that applied. 54 obviously is not 56. So if you're wondering, 2 states opted not to apply. The states of South Dakota and Florida opted not to apply for their allocation of funds. Those unclaimed funds are now rolling into the year 2 program and will be evenly distributed throughout all of the eligible states and territories who apply for funds in year 2. As mentioned, 13 states have actually submitted cybersecurity plans to date. And of those 13, we have actually just recently approved 10 of those plans. And with that approval, we're now working with FEMA to release those funds for the states to begin to implement the measures they identified in their cybersecurity planning activities. But FEMA did complete all of the fiscal year 2022 award notifications in December 31st of last year. And we're very excited that with those awards now, states are beginning to submit cybersecurity plans to allow us to begin to release those funds directly to those communities. And as I mentioned, we've recently approved 10 of those plans. As I understand it, as of today, 2 states have actually received their release of funds, New Hampshire and Pennsylvania, but we anticipate the remaining 8 states that have recently received plan approvals. We'll start to see those funds moving over the next couple of weeks. And we're extremely excited to see that, as that's where the real work begins to mitigate some of the threats and challenges that those states face. Entities that have not completed their plans or need additional assistance, of course, are encouraged to work with their regional points of contact in our 10 CISA regions. In addition to developing their plans, there are some entities that may need to make small changes to the mandated planning committees that are required for the implementation of the program. They also will need to work with their regional POCs on those updates and ensure that those changes are accomplished before submitting or resubmitting their plans to CISA for final approval. We, of course, encourage all stakeholders to reach out to their colleagues in other states, territories, counties, and local governments to discuss best practices and to share their ideas and opportunities for one another to help benefit from one another's experience. And of course, for all entities, cybersecurity plans for all of the states, territories under the year 1 program, those plans have to be submitted not later than September 30th of 2023. Now, we're also in the preparation stages to release the second year notice of funding opportunity for this program, which we anticipate will be released later on this summer. We also want to be cognizant of making large changes that may significantly impact entity cybersecurity plans, as these plans are designed to be good for 2 years. So we're looking now at the plans that are being received in year 1 of the program to understand how states and territories are allocating those funds and ensure that they're achieving the goals and objectives identified in the original notice of funding opportunity. We're working carefully with our stakeholder communities to also collect best practices and opportunities for improvement that we can use to enhance the program going into year 2. And I invite you to provide us with that same feedback if there's things that you're seeing in the program, or if you'd like to see enhancements to the program as we approach our next year. Now, finally, as a final resource, I'd like to direct you to our newly updated CISA.gov website. If you're familiar with the old CISA.gov, you may have felt a little frustrated when trying to find the information you needed quickly. Our team has spent several months talking to stakeholders and getting feedback to help develop a new, very user-centric design that makes our agency's resources and tools easier to find In fact, you'll find on that page, instead of having to search through for different programs and resources, we've created what we call a filterable system on our resources and tools page that makes it very easy for you through a few simple clicks to find the tools and resources that you're looking for, and the products and services that we can offer you right there from our website. We've put a lot of effort into making CISA.gov a true one-stop shop for our partners to find resources, and we encourage you to explore that. And again, we welcome your thoughts and feedback on ways we can continue to improve that information exchange so that you can find the support you need. Now, in closing, we know that we cannot secure our homeland alone. This is very much a team effort. And with your help and the help of our many SLTT partners, CISA seeks to raise the collective security of our cyber and physical infrastructure. Protecting our homeland requires action from each and every one of us. We need to get the advantage as the defender. Whether we are collectively protecting a local utility company, our city's emergency services, a local school, or a public event, we need a whole of nation approach to raise the security of our communities. As we work to achieve this goal, we ask that our state, local, and critical infrastructure partners tell us the problems you are facing and what CISA can do to assist in helping you address those concerns. The majority of the resources we provide are free, and we are here to help you better protect your communities, because in the current environment, if we prepare individually, then we will all fail collectively. Now, thank you again for inviting me to be here today. I'm very happy to take any questions that I can answer for you.
Yes, I promise to share contact information.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we are going to provide our contact information on the screen for you in case you would like to have any follow-up discussions with us. You'll see a number of folks identified there. Two of our leaders, Kevin Dillon and Sarah Pease, lead our strategic relations team. They are a great resource to connect and to help you find any resource you need within CISA. Bob Nadeau, of course, our branch chief for partnerships, is our representative for state, local, and tribal governments. And then, of course, Beth Mitchell, if you have any specific questions that I can't answer today on the cybersecurity grant program.
And I will be sending out that contact information to everyone who signed up for this webinar. Thank you so much, Trent. That was great information. We do have a few questions. I will go ahead and look those up.
Yeah, I just found them. I'll just walk through if I can. Melissa Lowe, does CISA offer technical assistance to economic development districts and likewise regionally focused organizations looking to train local government officials within their region on threats, ransomware information, and other cyber-related vulnerabilities? We do actually provide a number of resources that you can use in providing that kind of training. One of the first things I would encourage you to do is connect directly with the regional office adjacent to your community, and they can help you set up a program of content that you can use and potentially even help you in providing some of that training. So if you need information about how to find that regional office, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll make sure. And in fact, what we might do is we'll email Jessica here today and give a link directly to our regional sites so that you can find the contact information for all of our regional offices. It looks like we had an anonymous attendee who asked, many economic development districts may not have the staff capacity to put cybersecurity concerns at the forefront of their day-to-day activities. What would you say are some of the core or must-have initial steps to secure their networks and organizational activities in the cyber world? That's a great question. And one of the most recent tools that we've released is something called our cybersecurity performance goals. It is actually a very user accessible tool that you can use to just walk through what we consider to be those cybersecurity foundational elements. They are the things that every organization, large or small, should be actively concerning themselves with as they consider their cyber posture. And if you use that tool, it's actually also a ready resource for you to rapidly prioritize where to focus your efforts. So you needn't try to answer all of the concerns reflected across the cybersecurity community if you're tackling those foundational elements, that what we consider that basic cyber hygiene. It's going to really help you prioritize and focus your energy. And again, we'll make sure that Jessica and the team have that information and links to that tool so that we can get that out to the folks on today's webinar. Anonymous also asked, Are those state cybersecurity plans publicly available? So we, CISA, do not release those state cybersecurity plans. You would need to request the actual plan from your state CIO, who is the final approving official for that plan, and they are the keeper of that plan. Now, what we, of course, have access to those plans because we are responsible for reviewing and approving them, but because they are indicative of the assessment of vulnerability and needs across a given state, we defer to the state to actually release those plans upon request. Is there a list of the states that have received approvals thus far? There is not a public list of the states that have received approvals, but every state that receives approval will receive a notification. Technically, I think it's from me, although I think it's automated at this point. It comes with my little signature on it, notifying them that they have been approved, and then we do some public discussions with that state. But there is no concerted list. That's in part because we don't want to create a public sort of pressure on states that are working to develop their plans. We want to ensure states take the time that they need to develop those plans appropriately. I will note, though, every state is required to have a state level planning committee that should include appropriate representation of local jurisdictions, and that planning committee includes the state CIO. So if you have any questions, you should reach out to your CIO or to your state administrative agency, and they can help make sure that you have the right voice on that planning committee, and that'll help you keep up to speed with where the state is going in terms of development of those plans. And I apologize, Flo, I didn't say your name the first time, but I'm going to say it for the second question. Flo, I'm going to apologize, Ray Tiano. I hope that's pretty close. Do you work with COGs that are not currently a designated EDD? So we of course will support a council of government even if you're not designated as an EDD. The restrictions on the designation, the jurisdictional designation, really pertain specifically to your eligibility to receive funds as a sub-jurisdiction to a state under the cybersecurity grant program. But of course, we can certainly provide you any number of services and support if you feel free to reach out to your adjacent regional office, or you can reach out to us here and we'll help make sure that you get connected. Absolutely. What role does CISA play in developing and implementing cybersecurity policies and regulations? Well, at the federal level, we work very closely with a number of our federal partners, as well as the White House and Congress, in the establishment of ongoing policy and regulatory practices across the government. And we have a lot of work happening that we are part of in terms of the harmonization of those regulatory policies. So we participate on a number of federal councils that are involved in continuously assessing regulatory actions to ensure some measure of harmonization, especially where it pertains to information sharing and information reporting on cybersecurity. And in fact, we're eagerly anticipate the upcoming release of what will be the Cyber Incident Reporting Council's report on harmonization efforts coming out from the Department of Homeland Security in the next month or so, as an opportunity to engage further on discussion about harmonization. What are some of the most significant cyber incidents that CISA has responded to in the past, and what lessons have been learned from those incidents? That's a great question, and it's a fairly complicated question, so I'll try to give you a somewhat concise response to that. I mean, I think probably the most recognized incident that folks should be aware of is what is in the public sphere called solar winds. It's actually classified as the sunburst incident. The solar winds incident was an instance where an adversarial nation state had actually corrupted the build environment for a small software provider out of Austin, Texas, in fact. And through that corruption had introduced malicious code directly into their software. And by corrupting their build environment, they actually circumvented the encryptions, what you would think of as a trust certificate for all of the customers that vendor sold to. So rather than attack the customer directly, they went to the software provider, they introduced code directly into the product up front, and then the product was sent out as a patch directly to customers downstream. And it just so happened that this developer had sold, while it was a small developer, it sold a niche product to a sizable number of critical infrastructure owners and operators. And as a result, there was a substantial likelihood of intrusion for surveillance purposes across federal, state, and local governments, as well as critical infrastructure owners and operators. That's probably the most recognized. That particular incident resulted in the Cyber Solarium Commission from Congress, which provided a number of recommendations to include creation of capabilities that we CISA are now implementing. There are certainly others that are probably not entirely recognized as cybersecurity incidents. I think the Columbia Pipeline incident last year is probably one of the more well-known of those. That was actually a cyber intrusion into an IT system that resulted in the owner operator actually raising a concern that their IT system had a touch point with their operating system for their pipeline, and thus they shut down the pipeline to fully conduct a full survey of that system before restoring normal operations. In doing so, of course, they terminated natural gas flows up and down the eastern seaboard, and that resulted in a number of concerns from an energy perspective for the eastern seaboard. You're probably familiar with that from seeing people on TV rushing gas stations to try to fill up on gas because of that particular incident. Those are just a couple of examples, but we're seeing an ever-growing number of folks who are using what we would consider to be relatively complex attack vectors to actually conduct disruptive operations that impact communities really across the country. And I think the key takeaway when you think about those incidents is how completely and utterly interconnected our lives are now as a result of digital technology. And once you begin to fully grasp the depth and complexity of those connections, you can understand why we are so concerned with ensuring that cybersecurity is preeminent in the work we're doing to build resiliency for critical infrastructure owners and operators. And hopefully that answered your question. All right, I don't think I see, unless I'm not operating Zoom correctly, I don't think I see any additional questions.
Can you share any examples of how CISA has helped a smaller government improve its cybersecurity posture?
Sure. Well, we've done a number of actions across our regional offices. Those can be everything from basic cyber hygiene assessments, where we have one of our cybersecurity advisors actually come on site to, typically not the entire government, because obviously even small local governments will have multiple subunits within the government that have independent or quasi-independent networks. But we'll actually have a cybersecurity advisor conduct an assessment with that local government or entity to understand where they have maybe a vulnerability or capability gap in their network defenses, and then help them identify potential mitigations. We can do anything from that kind of assessment all the way through what I mentioned earlier, the free vulnerability scanning service that we use. That is an automated service, but it essentially allows you to sign up and then have them constantly scanning your network accessible devices to ensure that they are not vulnerable to kinds of threats and hazards. At the general scale, even without direct engagement with CISA, you can find a lot of information in our catalog of known vulnerabilities that's easily accessible to you and can be used for you to understand what we see, not just nationally, but globally through connections we have with our partner and near peer countries throughout the world. And you'll find in that known vulnerabilities catalog a rather extensive list of known vulnerabilities in softwares and systems across the world that we want to ensure folks are aware of and able to take immediate action to address. And of course, in our regional offices, we also have a number of folks who will meet with you and work with you directly. Those include the cybersecurity advisors I mentioned, also physical security advisors who are available to help you conduct physical security assessments and develop those mitigations locally as well. And we have emergency communications specialists who can work with your communications teams to ensure that all of your EC components are secured and defended appropriately. And then, of course, we have a number of folks who support those. One of the more recent roles that we actually deployed includes something we call our state cybersecurity advisor or state cybersecurity coordinators. Those aren't folks who work directly with local communities, but they are there to be a voice for the state to ensure that the state is taking active measures to protect their communities. And they provide an additional resource to provide support to the states themselves and to the federal territories.
I actually have one question, if that's all right.
Oh, sorry, Jessica. That's not, we don't, yeah, it's okay. Go ahead.
A number of regional organizations and EDDs have invested in cybersecurity insurance. Does CISA offer any recommendations or anything that you should be looking for as you're developing a contract or a policy with an outside organization?
Those are two overlapping concepts. So maybe I'm going to separate the concept of insurance from the concept of vendor contracting, if I can, for a moment. One of the key facets of the cyber performance goals, as a tool, but also as a guidance resource, is to really help end users understand and become educated consumers of services. So it's not the intent that someone who's using that guidance should necessarily become a cybersecurity professional, although we certainly love to see more cybersecurity professionals, but rather to be able to understand and have educated discussions with your vendors about the kinds of security services they should be offering you as a part of those negotiations and resources. Now, we don't offer what you might consider contract terms or conditions that you can sort of transpose directly into your documentation. That's in part because, honestly, and I say this, still paying for my law degree, the breadth and diversity of legal constructs across U.S. states and territories is such that we would never have enough bandwidth to provide meaningful contract assistance in that way. But the cybersecurity performance goals should be a foundational document that you can use as you're developing your own contracts to understand the kinds of conversations and, frankly, the kinds of support that you should be looking for from your vendors, and ensure that those are captured appropriately through whatever legal means in your contracts with those vendors. And we strongly encourage folks to use the CPGs as a baseline assessment of where they may want to address vulnerabilities, not only in their existing owned networks or owned hardware, but in the services that they're receiving from potential vendors.
Fantastic. As there are no more questions, I just want to take this time to thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to everyone who attended. We look forward to working with you in the future.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here today. And again, as I mentioned, it looks like Jessica included it in the chat. CISA.gov, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. We welcome the opportunity to meet with you. And if you have any follow-up questions, we're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Everyone have a fantastic day.